Hello, here we are, the core class for week 7. And joining us for class today is Jacqueline. Jacqueline, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Great, doing great. Um, looks like Sam may be coming in. Mr. Sam Dickens, how are you, sir?
I'm fine. How are you, Harold?
I'm doing great. Thanks for stopping by the core class. Really appreciate it.
I wish I'd made it more often.
And we have Whitney Williams, one of our guides. Whitney, how are you?
Good. Hope
Great.
everyone is.
Yeah, we have Jacqueline, yourself, myself, and Mr. Sam Dickens. Um, so today we're going to be discussing a hermetic principle, cause, and effect. And if for us in the class that we're talking, we were talking about some really good stuff in the chat rooms right before class, and I noticed that Sam, you you had said wow to something because when you started saying like I can't think of a time where cause and effect didn't play into some situation or anything like that. And then I kind of mentioned like if I mixed or if we mixed polarity with it, it's almost like a polarity. One, the cause and effect can't exist without the other, so it kind of applies to the law of polarity too. And what I was doing was I was thinking, okay, what about creation itself? The creation itself would be the cause, and then the effect is quite obvious. You know, the effect is quite obvious. Um, but the principle of cause and effect, um, according to the Kabbalion, every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to the law. Chance is but a name for the law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So it's like anything that is apparent in our consciousness is like it applies to that hermetic principle of cause and effect.
Yes, it does.
Um, the hermetic principle of cause and effect, it immediately tells us that nothing happens by chance. And I think that's, you brought that up, Mr. Dickens, in the chat room about coincidences.
No, I don't believe that was me there. I didn't. I don't think I brought up the coincidence thing.
Oh, somebody had brought it up,
Yeah, I remember reading it.
and well, the thing about it is when it comes to the coincidences, and if you talk to people within our community, you know, our pagan community, our occult community, our magical community, every one of us have like the same opinion. And Jacqueline got kicked out, but we're going to add her right back. She got booted
Yeah.
up for some reason, so we're going to bring her back. So she's back. It seems like everybody in the community has this general consensus that, well, I don't believe in coincidence.
That's true. That's what I was reading. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I don't. I think that everybody in our magical community, our occult community, um, our craft community has the same consensus that there is no coincidence. Um,
I think that's a common belief among us pagans.
yeah, and it's a really good belief too because it it runs parallel to an immutable truth, a truth that we can't argue with. I really would like to see somebody try to argue with the immutable truth just to further analyze it to get a different perspective. But so far in our journey, in the court class, I haven't seen anybody that could take one of these immutable truths and say, no, that's not true.
I think if somebody was able to discover a quote coincidence, um, if they were able, they would trace that coincidence back to its cause. It's just a matter of, can we, in this physical world in which we interact, are we able to trace back to the cause? But those of us that study know that this is the law. There is cause and effect. And in actuality, all the other Hermetic principles exist within this cause and effect. None of them can interact outside of it either. This is like the end all be all of the Hermetic principles, and all others are within that, because everything is cause and effect. And when you get down to it, somebody mentioned in the comments, cause and effect works better with mentalism. Cause and effect, it is mentalism. Everything that you think has, an effect, because your mind and thought is the cause. And just like you were saying, Harold, going back to creation, the people that believe that creation existed through the thought of the divine, that being the cause, that thought in the mind of the creator, whatever you believe that to be, whether that's, source or what have you, that thought was the cause that therefore created. And so everything, all the principles work inside of that. None of them work outside of it. But we become more powerful when we realize that mentalism is the cause. And that's how we can start to use our understanding of all these principles together to learn how to create the cause of that in which we desire. And we can't do that by fighting against effect. And that's what a lot of people try to do. They don't like the effect, so they want to fight against the effect instead of saying, I'm not going to react. I'm going to step back and look behind the curtain. And that's where we have to have that control of ourselves to be able to say, I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to step back and say, what principles, were at play here? What's the cause at play? So that we're no longer reactive, but we can trace it back and then say, I am instead going to create a new cause.
Mm-hmm.
Have a different desired effect. And that's what it really all comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Somebody in the chat room had just said, cause and effect would also lead into the principle of mentalism, which includes thinking and feeling. You need to think and feel to understand the cause and effect. That was one of the comments in the chat room.
Yeah. I noticed too that every action, what are we doing now? Huh? Okay. My nurse is here giving me shots and things. I noticed too that every action, in my experience, as I think about it, every physical action begins with a mental action. We think about something, we consider it, and then we make a decision to do something before we actually do it. And this is just at the mundane level. So there is the mental action always precedes the physical action. And very often, if you want to get into the details, there is an emotional reaction that comes before even the mental reaction. In our experience, if we get into a situation, we usually react emotionally first, and then we react cognitively, and then we react physically, like, let's get the hell out of here, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of noticing that procedure of things. So even at the mundane level, there is that precedence of mental action, thought, imagination.
One thing that I also remember that was happening in the chat room right before class was somebody was saying that, and I quote, actions and inactions are the same, each having its own cause and effect. So actually not doing, so really what's going on is not doing nothing at all has its own effect in a cause. Like it's, you can, and it's one of those polarity things where it's like a double polarity. It's quite surprising. It's surprising because you have to really, well, wait a minute. And
that's where a lot of people say, like, not making a choice is making a choice.
Right. In the chat room, one can have no physical action with the first. Okay. One can have no physical action with first the mental action, moving a finger. The brain sends a signal to synapses between the nerves to cause the finger to move.
The motor nerves, yeah.
Yeah, it just, and it is a rabbit hole. It gets really, 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 really deep. I think when talking about that Hermetic principle of cause and effect, I think that's thinking outside the box so much, where it's an inaction becomes like an action almost, because not doing something is you're still doing something by not doing it. If
it's
I see some,
it's a negative action. It's I don't know how you would call that, but it is an action. Inaction is an action. It's the
Right.
course of action. If you make a choice, you can choose to act or not act. Kind of like Wu Wei. But it is an action after all when we choose not to act, when we choose to remain still or to back out from a situation where we need to act. That is a choice and it is an action.
so if we use the principle of cause and effect, and the cause is, or the action is, we all came to the core class today, what would be the effect of that?
We'll find out by the end of class.
We will, won't we? We definitely will. And if we use the Hermetic principle of cause and effect, and we quit the core class, that's an action. What would be the effect of that action?
Not moving forward, not continuing the education, and thereby we showed up to have a discussion to hopefully gain some enlightenment. Keep moving that forward.
Right. I'm really wrapping my own mind around this and getting some feedback from some of y'all. And not to move things in a political direction, because I will not do that. I seldom do that. But if we make a public declaration advocating for a particular political party, that action has an effect.
Oh, big time.
That's just an example. And we're talking about inaction, so not endorsing any particular political party, that in itself has an effect as well.
Mm-hmm.
They always say that if you find a politician objectionable, but you say nothing about it, you remain silent, they say that is consent to what they say, to the actions of that objectionable politician. Uh, so it is like saying that you do not disapprove of what he or she did.
It's kind of
I
that double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Immediately when we start talking about cause and effect, I think if you ask, a random pagan that question, what's cause and effect, I do feel like karma will come up. And if we get into karma, karma comes from the Hindus, and I think their idea of karma is a little bit different than like somebody in the craft or somebody in the occult, where they'll immediately bring up like the law of three or something like that, or what comes around whatever comes around goes around. But I think it's a little bit different than that if we bring it right back to cause and effect. Yeah. Jacqueline, what can you give me an example of cause and effect?
Driving through a parking lot with a lot of broken glass, you're going to get a flat tire.
Right. The action is driving in the parking lot, and then the effect is.
That's the only thing I could come up with on the fly like that.
Okay, so in the chat room, so here's a question related to the Hermetic principles. According to this philosophy, the divine is both the all and the creator of the all, in essence being both the cause and effect of, for example, the birth of the universe. Do you think that this indicates one entity would have to possess both polarities, both genders, or neither, positive and negative vibrations, etc., for this to be true? Essentially, they would need to be capable of both sides of each principle. Does that make sense? Does anybody have anything to say on that? I have something to say. Oh, good. Sam, you got something?
No, what they said though was that the divine is both the all and the creator of the all. That was what they said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you think that this indicates one entity would have to possess both polarities, both genders, or neither, positive, negative vibrations, etc., for this to be true? Essentially, they would need to be capable of both sides of each principle. Does this make sense?
I think it does. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
Someone in the chat room said it depends on chaotic design principle and intelligent design. To answer the chat room, we were just talking about that same thing to back up when we were talking about the Hermetic principle of gender. And what we were talking about was something that I had found with the Egyptian creation story. In the Egyptian creation story, the particular deity that created creation was a hermaphrodite type of deity. And then it basically said, you're God, you're goddess, here you are. So to answer, the question, I believe, yeah, you're spot on. Yeah, it would definitely have to be capable of both sides. Definitely. That would be my answer.
And I think it's another thing that we need to do if we're looking at the creator or divine possessing all of these qualities, principles, and in both aspects and all the aspects. We also need to look at if we are an extension of that divine, where and how do we possess and express all of these principles ourselves as well?
Well, we do.
Chat room says creation is neutral and both at the same time. Exactly. Absolutely. Here's one thing that I was analyzing before class, and this is kind of cool that I thought. Are we a cause or are we an effect? When we unlock our own spirituality, I feel like we become the cause. When we follow the spirituality of others, I feel like we become the effect. So I think what that tells us is, are we just a pawn or are we playing chess? Are we, so the cause is your leadership and your effect is your following or as a follower. That's the effect of it. And initially, the core class is designed for us to unlock our own spirituality and stop tuning into everybody else's. So under the Hermetic principle of cause and effect, I don't even know if we can even compare it to that. But it's just a comparison that I was contemplating before class. Any thoughts?
I think you can definitely compare it to that. That when a person wanders through life with no direction, I have just closed. There we go. Goodness. When a person wanders through life with no direction, just enjoying life in their own way, not really setting out to commit themselves to any purpose or anything, I think they're like what you were saying. They're just like pawns. They go wherever life takes them, and they have no purpose. They have no contribution to make. They are just enjoying life in a fairly hedonistic way, and they are pretty much at the hands of fate, as you would say. Whereas a person who has, like Martin Luther King, for example, has that vision, that personal drive, they are
Somebody in the chat room had said,
of their own fate. They are the masters of their destiny.
mm-hmm. Somebody in the chat room had said, each of us is the center of our universe. Having cause and effect, thus interactions with others cause different outcomes based on the interactions of natural laws and the micro universes interacting. That's deep. That's deep.
And in response to your question and thoughts that you're pondering,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we very much are the effect of the creator creating as the cause. And I think within that, we were gifted with the same power of creation so that we can in turn create our own cause and effect. So I think it was something that was passed on. So while we may be the effect, we were also gifted with creation to create cause.
Yeah, I'm going with that, and I'm going with that because if I feel like if we break it down with magic itself, if we have the intent to create through mentalism an elemental being to do a certain task through mentalism, we've set the cause. What it is its effect. Therefore, we are creating ourselves. I want to say microcosmically. Not. We're using the essence of creation itself because if we're a reflection of creation, we also can create. And that's what you're saying, right? Right, Whitney?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when it comes to magic, that you're absolutely right. Like we are using our powers of creation to create cause. And it does have an effect, which is what we are desiring when we do any kind of magic. But I think we have to be careful when we think that the effect only has a microcosm effect. We have to think responsibly when we do magic and think wider than that as to what other effects may we be in turn causing. And it's not to say that that's right or wrong, good or bad. It's being aware of what kind of far-reaching effects we may actually be having, rather than staying so singularly focused within our own desired effect. We have to also weigh out the effects that it will have out into the rest of the world. And that's the responsibility of having these powers of creation, especially when we decide to use them, which we do a lot more frequently than we realize. But when we are purposely going to that point of creation with magic, we really have to weigh in on the micro and macro.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a book today, book review today about ethics, magical ethics. And it was talking about if you might do a magical spell to redirect bad weather away from the village where you live. But at the same time, the bad weather goes over and ruins another village nearby. Well, you've done something bad there without intending to, but you've just not been ethically aware of your responsibilities, what you might, what might happen if you take this action. So that's kind of what you were talking about, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And so it's looking at like, is what we're about to do magically the right thing to do? Is it truly the desired effect that we're wanting to create? So rather than maybe moving the bad weather somewhere else, maybe we work to dissolve or transmute or change the bad weather into something different rather than pushing it in another direction. And that's where we have to start thinking wider and outside of the box, especially when it comes to magic. So yes, absolutely. Great example.
Do you think that we should be focusing on the cause aspects of things over the effect aspects of things? Kind of like, well, we make our own bed and we lay in it. Now, when we make our own bed, that's the cause, and the effect is whether it's like comfy with silk sheets or with, dirty stains and smells bad or whatever. So is the cause aspects of the principle the way to go, or when does the effect part become beneficial? Well, it only becomes beneficial if the cause is just. So I think as like magical folks, it's almost like we have to, when we put something out into the world, starting with mentalism in our mind, kind of like Sam was saying earlier, we have to like think through of the effect that it's going to place for us and also the people around us. So it's almost playing into awareness almost. And for a lot of magic folks, cultists, in the craft people, it almost becomes very intriguing to try to contemplate all of these immutable truths. And I think that a practitioner or somebody who lives this magical lifestyle, I think that if we can utilize all of these immutable truths in our daily activities, man, I feel like they could yield a lot of success You know, would you agree, Sam? Mr. Dickens?
I've, I've been writing on some stuff. Mundane world. Every action we do creates a new world. However petty the action is, the world is different after we do something than it was before. Uh, have you ever made your own craft uh, tool, like a staff or a wand? Well, that thing did not exist until you made it. So that was an obvious act of creation.
Hmm.
But actually, every action we take rather creates the world anew. The world is different after the action than it was before because every action causes change, and every change makes the world different than it was before. And when you're doing this, you are creating. And the only difference between this and the acts of the gods that we imagine when they created the world is that they started from nothing and made something, as it were. You know, they were starting from a much more primitive level, but we're starting from the world around us, and the end result of our actions is another world around us. It's just a little different. So we are actually creating, it's just not as dramatic as the ones we imagine at the dawn of time. However, it's all creation, and it's this is mundane creation. Of course, we can also talk about arcane, occult creation, magical creation. Uh, but if you think about it in that way, you begin to appreciate the importance of our everyday actions. We are actually bringing about something that wasn't before. And I know we do mundane things, and it's you know scratch an itch and stuff like that all the time. But we are capable of doing profound things, and the only difference is that we don't set out to do profound things very much. We just do mundane things. And when you think about it, every one of us human beings is capable of creation. Eh, and it can be a profound creation if we set out to do it. Our minds are capable of it. Uh, there is no real difference between everyday creation and the creation at the dawn of time. It's just a different setting. And that's what I was writing on today. And
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Dickens. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add when it comes to the Hermetic principle of cause and effect? Whitney?
You had mentioned when we're, practicing magic and what's more important when we're looking at weighing like cause and effect, and which end of that spectrum is where do we place our focus, and how do we uh, you know choose essentially like how it all comes together. But we do that through adding in all the other principles, you know um, and we have to make sure that we're not so tunneled in, to just cause and effect, or just the mentalism behind it, but that we are taking into account all the other laws that will be in principles that are in effect when we decide to create this cause. And so it's not only just examining the effect, but also examining the cause in turn and making sure that we're putting the right pieces into play in line with the other principles to get whatever, quote, just, somebody used the word just, cause, to get the desired effect. We really have to be very careful in making sure we're fully encompassing all the aspects and knowing that we're not just creating a change for ourselves or within us, which we are, but that if we are a part of the all, that on some level, in some aspects, we're also creating an effect on the all. And I think that's what it comes down to, like what Sam was just saying, when we choose to do something profound, whether it's on a small level or a large scale, I feel like we are having a very big effect on the all as well, even when we don't realize it. And I think that's why sometimes people may try to argue that there are coincidences or serendipitous events or, magical, miraculous results, which I completely believe in and love. But I think it all goes back to we all played some kind of part through the all, and that's the cause. And even if we can't conceptualize it or see it, or if we can never trace it all the way back to the cause that took place, on some level it did. And so it's not only us, but it's much larger than us, but also much smaller and simpler than us when we look at these principles. And it's wrapping your mind around all of it and realizing that we as humans have the unique perspective and capability of awareness. And that is the thing that separates us, and using that awareness to our fullest capacity. And that's where we start with it all, is in that awareness before we move in any direction, before we allow ourselves to have any thought or feeling or move in any direction, is having that awareness of our thoughts, of our bodies, of our minds, of our emotions, and realizing that we are not slaves to the mind or to our emotions or to the things around us, to other people or what they may say or do. The only thing we are slaves to is the untamed mind and the lack of awareness that we maintain over ourselves. And that's where it really all starts. And from there, we're able to really conceptualize and understand the principles and use them to the fullest to affect the big and the small, us and the all. So,
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. In the chat room, the concept of justice is not part of the natural law, nor immutable principles, but merely a mutual concept that changes based on social norms. With that being said, that about wraps up Sunday's week 7 for Sunday for the Hermetic principle of cause and effect. I hope to see y'all back on Wednesday at 6. Thanks for coming by the core class.
Thank you.